In this video, we are going to be discussing angles. Our essential questions are, what are the parts of an angle? What are acute, obtuse, right, and straight angles? And how do you name an angle? So first of all, what are the parts of an angle? Well, an angle is created by three things, really, two sides and what's called a vertex. Now, when two rays come together or two lines cross, you form angles. And the lines that form these angles are called the sides. And the vertex is the point where these two rays or these two lines come together. So in these diagrams here, we have a vertex where these two rays come together, and each of the rays is called a side. And the space created by these, like you can think of it like a door opening up, the space created inside of that is called the angle. And angles are measured in degrees from 0 to 360 degrees. So an angle is created by two rays or two lines that meet or cross. So here in the second diagram, we have two lines that intersect or cross, and where they cross is called the vertex. And the lines that create the angles are called the sides. So there's one angle on the top here that I'm referring to, and those are the sides of the angle, and that space in between them right here is called the angle. And again, that's measured in degrees. There are actually four different angles created when two lines cross, but I'm just going to talk about that one right there. So an angle has really three parts, two sides and a vertex. And then something to note as well, when you have more than one vertex, it's called vertices. They are called vertices, not vertexes. So don't try to pluralize vertex in that way. More than one vertex is called vertices. So what types of angles are there? There are really four types of angles, and they're categorized by their size. And one type of angle is an acute angle, and acute angles are angles that are less than 90 degrees. So I have four different angles here that are all acute, and you can see that if I were to draw a 90-degree angle over top of this angle, you can see that this angle right here is less than 90 degrees. It's not as wide open as a 90-degree angle, so that one is acute. This one as well, if I were to lay a 90-degree angle over it roughly, you can see that's less than 90 degrees. This angle is less than 90 degrees, and this angle is also less than 90 degrees. Those are all examples of acute angles. Next, we have obtuse angles, and these are angles that are greater than 90 degrees. And again, if I were to overlay a right or a 90-degree angle on it. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. This is a 90-degree angle right here, and then you can see that the blue angle is a little bit bigger than that, a little more open than that. So that's an obtuse angle. Again, this is more wide open than a 90-degree angle. This one as well, and then this one as well. So the more wide open it gets, we call those obtuse angles. And then we have a right angle, which is exactly 90 degrees. So I only need one example of that because all 90-degree angles look the same. And then something to note or remember as well, that when you see a little box in the corner of an angle, that indicates that it is a 90-degree angle. So we can't always assume that something that looks like it's 90 degrees is 90 degrees. So we have to look for that box that indicates that it is 90 degrees. And then the last angle is called a straight angle. And these angles are exactly 180 degrees. So that's probably as wide open an angle that we're going to work with. So this angle actually goes from here to here like this. Even though it looks like a straight line with a dot in the middle of it, this is actually the vertex right here. And that is a straight angle, one that is exactly 180 degrees. So the four types of angles: acute angles, obtuse angles, right angles, and straight angles. So how do you name an angle? We can't just give it a cute name like Bob or Larry. There are several ways to name angles in geometry, and I'm going to go through all the different ways to name them. And any of these are sufficient. Sometimes we use one in one case, and then we'll use one in another case. We'll use different ways to name angles, but you have to know all of them so that you're comfortable with them. So the first way to name them, the most basic way to name an angle, would be to name an angle using 3 points on the angle. And we're going to use three specific points. We're going to use a point on one of the sides, followed by the vertex, and then a point on another side or the other side of the angle here. So something to note here before we get into this, that this little like crooked L or leaning L, that's the angle symbol. So we would read that as an angle. So this angle right here, there are two different ways we can name this angle using the side vertex side strategy, and that would be we can name this point on this side, followed by the vertex, followed by the point on this side. So A, B, C. So angle ABC would be one way to name that angle, just kind of like connect the dots. So we follow the angle from here, from A through B through C, and we're naming this angle right here, the space in between these two sides. Another way to name it would be to start here with C, go to B, and then to A. Again, we're tracing the same angle, we're just tracing it the other direction. So that would be an acceptable way to name that angle. Angle CBA is how we would say that. Notice that B is always the middle of the letters because that's the vertex. The vertex is always the middle letter. We could not name this angle BAC, for example. That would not name this angle, because if I go from B to A to C, notice I've gone rogue. I have gone off the angle, and that is not naming the angle or tracing the angle. So the vertex always has to be the middle letter when we use that strategy. The second way to do it is a simplified version of it, and that's just to name the angle only using the vertex. And we can only use this in one specific case, and that's when there's only one angle at that vertex. So if this is the only angle in the diagram, there's only one angle to name, we can just name it by its vertex. So we can call this angle Y because there's only one angle here that I'm referring to, so I don't have to say XYZ or ZYX because there's only one angle, so I'll name it by its vertex. So I can say angle Y. And then the third way to name an angle would be to use numbers inside the angle. Sometimes you'll see numbers written inside of an angle, and we can just refer to those angles with the numbers. And that, again, is an even shorter way to do that when we've got a diagram that contains a lot of angles, maybe a lot of angles that all use the same vertex, so that none of the other two would be efficient to use. We can just use the numbers inside of the angle. So angle 1 is referring to this angle right here. These are the two sides. These blue lines are the sides, and that would be angle 1. And then angle 2 is right here. Notice they share that same side. Here's angle 2. So those are the two angles that we're talking about in the diagram. So 3 ways to name an angle. So let's put what we've learned to use here in these examples. Let's name each angle in as many ways as we can and classify it by its size. So here we have a diagram of an angle. So let's name this in as many ways as possible. Well, the first way to name it would be side, vertex, side. So use a point on the side, use the vertex, and a point on another side. So we could go D, E, F. Angle D, E, F. That's one way to name this angle. Notice the vertex, E, is the middle letter. Or we could go the other direction, F, E, D, and get fed. Angle FED, and then we could also just name it by its vertex alone, angle E, since it's the only angle in that diagram, or there is a number inside this angle right here, so we could call it angle 3. So there's 4 ways to name that particular angle. Any one of those is acceptable, and then let's classify it by its size. Now, is this acute, obtuse, right, or straight? Well, this angle is less than 90 degrees, so this would be considered an acute angle. Next one, we have this angle here. We want to name it as many ways as possible. So again, I can use that first method by using the point on the side, vertex side, angle QRS, or I could go the other direction, angle SRQ, just kind of playing connect the dots, SRQ. That traces out the angle so that I can see that, or QRS. I can name it by its vertex since it's the only angle in that diagram, angle R. There is no number inside of the angle, so I can't use that strategy. So there's only 3 ways to name this angle. And then we notice there's that box in the center there. That tells us that this is a right angle. A right angle. And then the last one down here, let's name this angle as many ways as we can. And we have, again, side, vertex, side. So angle XYZ. I could name it the other direction, angle ZYX. Again, notice that that vertex Y is always the middle letter. Or I can name it just by its vertex, angle Y. And there is a number inside this angle right here, and I can call that angle 2. And this angle is wide open, but it's not all the way open. So this is an obtuse angle. That is greater than 90 degrees. That is an obtuse angle. So let's take a look at this diagram. There are a lot of angles in this diagram. Too many to talk about all of them, but I selected some of them here. We want to find each angle and classify it by its size. So I cannot call any angles angle X because I don't know which one I would be referring to if I just called it angle X. So there are a lot of angles here. So I'm going to use the first strategy here to name the angles, use the side vertex side strategy to name the angles. So let's find these angles, and to find them, we're basically going to trace out the letters in order. Angle A, X, C. So here's A, here's X, and here's C. So angle A, X, C is referring to this angle right here, this space between these two lines right here. So there's angle AXC. We found it. Well, what type of angle is that? Is that an acute, obtuse, right, or straight angle? That is a pretty wide open angle. That is an obtuse angle there. Next one, we want angle CXD. So let me clear that off. And angle CXD, here's C, here's X, and here's D. CXD, if I just trace those out, I get this angle right here. There's angle CXD, and that is smaller than 90 degrees, so that is an acute angle. And then we want angle BXE. So again, if I just trace out those letters BXE, here's B, here's X, and here's E. Those all fall in a straight line. So this angle right here, or actually we can think of this angle right here, it doesn't matter which side we're on because they're both the same. That is a straight angle. That one is exactly 180 degrees. Next, angle BXD. If we trace those out, here's B, here's X, and here's D. BXD. So this angle right here, that's a pretty wide open angle. That is obtuse. And then lastly, angle AXB. And again, if we trace out those letters, A, X, B, and if I connect the dots here, angle AXB is this angle right here, and that is a smaller angle. That is less than 90 degrees, so that is another acute angle there. So you can see there are a lot of angles in this diagram, so locating them and classifying them is a critical thing to do. So parts of the angle, we've got two sides and a vertex. Remember, more than one vertex are called vertices, and acute, less than 90 degrees, obtuse, greater than 90 degrees, right angles are exactly 90 degrees, and straight angles are exactly 180 degrees. And then ways that we name our angles, either with the three letters with the vertex in the middle, name it by its vertex, or name it using a number that is inside the angle.